morning. How are you all? Good. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Quentin Fulks. I'm the Principal Deputy Campaign Manager for the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign. Thank you, Senator Jones, Representative Barber, for joining us today. Look, I know we're obviously here to talk about tonight's debate, but I need to take a minute to address the comments that we heard from Donald Trump last night. In primetime national television, without hesitation, Donald Trump told the American people that if he was able to regain power, he intends to rule as a dictator on day one. A dictator. That's no surprise when you just look at everything he's been telling us every single day on this campaign trail. Donald Trump has been hell-bent on banning abortion nationwide, running advertising about banning abortion, bragging about being the one to kill Roe, encouraging concealed weapon carry in classrooms as American children are continuing to be gunned down across the nation, ripping away health care from millions of Americans, and jailing the media and his political opponents, subverting our elections and echoing dictators from the past with his rhetoric. We've known this from some time, but last night Donald Trump gave it a name, a dictator on day one. So yes, we will talk about tonight's debates and answer questions, but we need to take a moment to really zero in on what matters here and what's truly at stake. It is imperative that we call out this rhetoric when we see it and make sure the American people really know what's at stake. So tonight, the rest of the MAGA field will be on stage to stake out the most extreme positions possible in Alabama, a place where Trump's MAGA agenda has been a disaster for working families. In fact, if you want to know what another 4 years of Donald Trump's America would look like, you have to look no further than Alabama. Thanks to this state's total abortion ban, women are less safe and unable to make their own health care decisions. Thanks to weak gun laws that have made it easier for criminals to carry guns, Alabama has the 4th highest rate of gun violence in America and is in the top 5 states of the highest gun violence homicides. Thanks to this governor's refusal to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, hundreds of thousands of Alabamians remain uninsured. And white supremacists have been empowered by leaders like self-proclaimed MAGA Republican Tommy Tuberville, who defended them proudly and called them Americans. Tonight's debate may just be a sideshow, but one thing is certain. Every Republican on stage tonight is desperate to mirror Donald Trump's MAGA agenda that would wreck the American economy and make life harder for and more expensive for middle-class families. Every single one of them is united and in support of a record of banning abortion, ripping away health care from millions of Americans and letting insurance companies deny care for those with pre-existing conditions, cutting taxes for the ultra-wealthy and corporations, big pharma, at the expense of the middle class, shipping jobs overseas, and the list goes on and on. Tonight, as MAGA Republicans outline their deeply unpopular extreme agenda, they'll remind the American people of the choice they'll face next November. The American people rejected this extreme MAGA agenda in 2020. They've rejected it in 2022. They rejected it this year in 2023, and they'll do it again next year. And with that, I'll hand it over to Senator Doug Jones.
Thanks, Quentin. Thanks for everybody being here. You know, I've been asked lately by some of our local media, especially, what you as a Democrat feel about the Republicans. Come here. I want to make one correction with Quentin. This is really not a debate tonight, folks. You can't debate when the front runner's not here. It's really just kind of a town hall get-together among folks either vying for the number 2 spot or just trying to be relevant for 2028. Because there's no way that I don't think anybody on that stage is going to win the Republican nomination. But I've said I thank them, and we really do. I think Barbara would echo that. We always like to see events like this down here. But today is especially important, fortuitously, because I think that there is also a direct connection between the spotlight on Alabama at today's Republican event and Senator Tuberville's release of the military promotions that he did yesterday. There was a rising tide, no pun intended for the University of Alabama. There was a rising tide of angst among his Republican colleagues who challenged him on the Senate floor. That angst had to have grown lately because of the event here tonight. So thank the military families, our nation's security. Also thank the Republicans for coming to Alabama and spotlighting what was Tuberville's ill-conceived hold on military promotions. A couple of things that I want to just kind of reiterate. And it's really things that I don't think you will hear tonight. You haven't heard them yet. And that is a counter to Donald Trump's vision of America. In fact, they're adopting somewhat that vision of America. Yes, Chris Christie and a couple of folks may challenge him because he's been indicted and has 91 serious charges, criminal charges facing him. But overall, these previous so-called debates have just been an adoption of that far right, that MAGA agenda that is not good for working families. It is not good for national security. It is not good for democracy. And it will be interesting tonight to see how they waltz around comments, if at all they try to comment, about the statements made by Donald Trump last night about being a dictator, saying out loud what you in the media have known for some time, what we all in America have known for some time. And so the one point that I want to highlight in the most recent comments is really the white supremacy issue. We are in Alabama. We have a horrible history of white supremacy in this state. And we still see it manifest itself on occasion. And the reality is that the language that politicians use, that people in public office, that people look to be leaders use, has consequences. And what we're seeing from Donald Trump and the far-right agenda is dangerous. And it's especially dangerous because it empowers white supremacists and the leadership. It fans the flames of racism and refusing to condemn the hatred that we see often flaring up. You know, I grew up here. I grew up in a Jim Crow era. I grew up and I saw firsthand what political rhetoric can cause. You only have to look back at what happened in 1963 when we had a lawless governor who said that the way to stop civil rights was to have a few first-class funerals. And about 3 weeks later, a bomb exploded at a church that killed 4 little girls. One of the most heinous crimes in American history. But it poses a threat to our democracy. It's not just a threat of the past. 6 months ago, white nationalists, hell-bent on trying to make this a purely white country, marched around our nation's capital. You saw Confederate flags on January 6th. You saw the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Those are folks that have a racist agenda. And the truth is that Donald Trump and his brand of MAGA Republican extremist, and that's what we've got to talk about here, have that same agenda. And that is the agenda that seems to be on the stage tonight. That seems to be, no one is condemning that rhetoric from Donald Trump, and they seem to be somewhat wholeheartedly embracing it. That violence, that rhetoric, extremism gives hate and fear far too much oxygen, allowing dangerous ideologies to fester, threatens the very institutions that uphold our democracy and make us the United States of America. That's what's at stake, folks. That's what we see at stake in Alabama. That's what is at stake across this country. They're too happy to embrace this extreme, often racist and deeply out of touch rhetoric because they're cynically betting that a scared and divided nation is how they win elections. Note that they're not competing on policy. Note that they're not setting forth an agenda about making America live up to the ideals that we were founded on. Instead, they're dividing. It is a stage of grievance. It is a stage of division. And that is what we're going to see once again the American people reject in November of 2024. So I'm pleased to be here today, but even more pleased to introduce a great friend and one of those great leaders who is making a difference in Alabama, making a difference for the people of Alabama in a big way by having a voice in the Alabama legislature that people listen to. And she is the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, the Honorable Representative Barbara Drummond from Mobile. Representative Drummond, thank you.
Good morning, and I want to thank the Senator and also Quentin. I really do thank you for sharing in this press conference, and welcome all of you who are not from Alabama. Welcome to the great state of Alabama. It is a wonderful state, and it's blue that is here as well as red, but there's some blue here this morning. I cannot overstate the danger that Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans' agenda poses for our nation's future. I want to tell you a little bit about what it's like as a woman to live in the state of Alabama where there's no reproductive rights, and how my experience would be the reality for every woman if America elects Donald Trump or any of the Republicans that is on the debate stage tonight. First and foremost, I want to start with the facts. When Republicans say that they wanted to overturn Roe in order to return the decisions to the states, they were lying. After successfully gutting 50 years of legal precedent that protected America's women's freedom to make their own choices and decisions about abortions, extremist Republicans aren't stopping there. Every single Republican on stage tonight is united in supporting banning abortion. And Donald Trump has the audacity to brag about his role in gutting our fundamental freedoms as a woman in the state of Alabama and this nation. Without him, Alabama's near total abortion ban would not be in place. The reality is a national abortion ban would have devastating consequences on the health and the safety of women across this nation. Restricting access to health care puts our lives and our health at risk, leads to increased rates of maternal mortality, creates a climate of fear among health care providers that impedes their ability to provide adequate care for women in this state, and reduces access in all forms of health care. In Alabama, women have been denied life-saving care for miscarriages. Health clinics have been shattered, and our Attorney General has threatened that he will prosecute anyone who even helps someone to travel out of state to receive the care that they so need. For us, abortion bans aren't political issues. They're fundamental questions of our freedom as women in this country and in the state of Alabama. So this is the contrast that voters will be confronted with when they cast their votes in 2024. Republicans are running on the anti-freedom agenda or taking away the rights and dictating women's private health care freedom. Or Democrats, or do you want Democrats who are committed to making sure people have rights, not fewer rights? Time and time again, voters in every corner of the country, they've rejected the Republicans' extreme anti-abortion agenda. And they're rejected again in 2024. As a woman in a state where that we have no freedom, I think there's a dire call that we have got to fight in 2024, that we fight for an agenda that not only will restore freedom to women and also restore health care to those women, but also take away the extreme MAGA's agenda to cause chaos, not only in the country, but in women's lives. So I thank you for being here this morning.
Okay, we've got time for a few questions. If you guys want to raise your hand. So you want to start?
Hi, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm Mariana. You guys can see the news polling we have. Often a generic Democrat, a Democrat other than the president, polls better than the president. So if former President Trump is such an existential threat, as you are saying, is there an argument that the party should be nominating anyone else?
Well, look, at the end of the day, the party has an obligation to put forth the best person to lead America and thankful for us that Joe Biden is already in office and is the President of the United States. And so Joe Biden is going to continue to run for president. But again, we continue to talk about polling and seeing polling. When voters are asked to move their feet and go to the ballot box, Democrats are winning. We saw it in 2020. We saw it in 2022. I made my remarks about what we've seen this year. And so, while Donald Trump is continuing to, put forth a hateful rhetoric and hateful agenda for America, we're still having conversations about polling rather than having a conversation about Donald Trump saying that he would be a dictator. And so that's what's at stake for us. And the president's going to continue to run, keep his head down to do the work. Our campaign is going to continue to build to make sure that we're in the strongest position. But make no mistake about it, as you've heard from myself and our two speakers, at the end of the day, this election is going to be a referendum for Americans about if they want more freedoms, not less, if they want to make America more affordable for middle-class families. And that's exactly what President Biden is doing. And so, again, we're focused on doing what we need to do to make sure that President Biden and Vice President Harris get reelected in 2024.
And when you look at the data for women in this country, you talk about polling, but when you look at the states that have already voted against the MAGA agenda as it relates to women's freedoms and rights, I mean, we can go down the list from Ohio on, but data has shown that women reject that agenda.
President Biden yesterday made comments too, though, that you guys didn't address, where he said that if it wasn't for former President Trump running, he's not sure that he would run. Are you guys anxious that if it is not for President Trump, that if the Republican nominee, it is going to be harder for Democrats to win?
We're perplexed as to why that's really a news story. That has been something that every candidate takes into account, who they're going to be running against. Joe Biden did that in 2020. People said his age is a factor in 2020. He looked at the field, he looked at what was going on with Donald Trump, and decided that he had something to offer. It's the same calculation. And what he is doing is saying, he's not saying that that's the only reason. He's not saying anything like that. But that's just not a news story. And the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden has had a long history of dedication to service to this country, to the people, to the Constitution. He sees that under a threat. And he is every day fighting for that. And he sees, and I don't think it would be, given his record on jobs, on everything of keeping our alliances strong, for him to think that he is in the best position to take on Donald Trump or anyone in the Republican Party who is adopting that same extremist view of the United States. And that's what's happening. So we're good. We're going to be strong. You're going to see that everything coalition coming together, and the polls will start as people focus on this election. Watch what happens.
I'm ready to go from here, Greg and Bill. The Commission on Presidential Debates now has the schedule out. Is the president committed to participate?
Look, at the end of the day, we're focused on building a campaign. We'll have those conversations, but right now, our focus is on making sure we continue to build out a campaign and infrastructure that's going to be able to be competitive in 2024.
So that's enough. You have not committed.
No, I said that the campaign is going to take a look at the schedule and we can have those conversations. But as of right now, our focus remains on building out a campaign and infrastructure while the Republicans remain in a divisive primary where their front runner is not attending debates. Our campaign is focusing on what we need to do to win an election next year.
Bill, you guys spent a lot of time obviously focusing on President Trump as a threat to democracy in his comments last night and the comments he's made leading up to that. But it is also true that a sizable portion of the country that makes up his base believes that the Justice Department now is being misused, the prosecutorial offices at the state level are being misused to attack him. Whether you accept that on the merits or not, what is the president's message to those people that look at the government and have such a fundamental mistrust, and what does that say about where we are in the country that, again, whether you like it or not, regardless of what Trump's saying, you have this, a full third of the electorate that just doesn't trust these institutions at all.
Look, at the end of the day, government has to get back into the business of helping people and not taking away freedoms and rights from people. But I do have to push back a little bit, Bill. I think that we can all agree, and I understand that there is this eager and desire to want to be sort of in the middle and not like a bias. what Donald Trump is out saying that he would do, and the way Donald Trump talks about weaponizing government, using the military to round up citizens, versus a sort of what I hear in your question is a sort of an equalization to people being dissatisfied are two very different things. Joe Biden is not standing out, going to a podium as president of the United States saying that he's going to round up his political enemies or use the government to go after his political enemies. And so, again, for us, our goal is making sure we draw the contrast and make sure that Americans see the difference between the type of administration Joe Biden is running and, quite frankly, what they've already seen from Donald Trump, and really focusing folks' attention, the media's attention, on what he's telling us that he's going to do. And last night is the first time that we've heard him just say out loud what a majority of Americans also think, is that he's going to behave and act like a dictator, and he confirmed that. And so, again, your premise of the question with people's trust and faith in government, I completely respect and understand. But at the end of the day, one versus with a front runner of the GOP telling them that he's going to weaponize their government is a completely different thing, and there is no comparison between Joe Biden or any of the other Republicans on the other side.
This woman here and then back there after.
Hi, I'm Julia Johnson of the Washington Examiner. I wanted to talk a little bit, is there concern about, because it is different than just anyone making a consideration about running again. I mean, there was significant doubt that Biden would run for re-election. He is, and there's age concerns across the board. Is that comment about Trump being the reason he is running again, is that going to undermine Democratic support? Is it going to make people look at these peripheral candidates or these third parties?
No, I don't think so. And again, I will bring back the phrase that even in this room right now, we've had several conversations about the polling, about the president's age, and not one thing about Trump saying that he would be a dictator. But to your point on it, at the end of the day, the president has, no other person in America right now has the wisdom and experience that Joe Biden is bringing to the table to lead our country through these complex issues. And so when it comes to the president's comments, again, as Senator Jones said, it's nothing new. The president said it in 2020 when he was running against Trump then, to restore the soul of the nation, defend democracy, and honestly sew back the fabric that Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans were trying to rip away. And so for us, we're keeping our head down and doing that. I do not think, and I think the way that these questions are framed, not to come in a defensive state, but is a very monolithic view of voters and the American people. The American people understand, and they are not thinking about it. I don't think any American person cares how old Joe Biden is when it comes to if they can get reproductive freedom in their state. I don't think they care when it comes to is gas cheaper or if inflation is coming down. I think that that's what American people are focused on. And while the media continues to try to make it seem as though American people are focused on how old the president is or what he might say versus Trump, who's saying he's going to be a dictator while he's already taken away their freedom and is quite frankly bragging about it through paid media and in his rhetoric and speeches and all across the country, is a very monolithic view and one that does not do justice to the American people when it comes to what they want. And again, we can talk about polls, but the proof is in the pudding when you look at 2020, 2022, 2023. And so, again, if we're going to have these conversations, they also need to be married to reality of what's happening when voters go to the ballot box.
To follow that on the polls, what Quentin just said is incredibly important, because at the end of the day, elections are about choices, and that's the most important poll. And what happens a year early is a snapshot of somebody's thinking whenever they pick up the phone or answer their phone. That is only a quick snapshot. But as this campaign focuses on choices, that's where you'll see things begin to move. And that's why the election results over the last few years are the best indicator of where we are in this country, and not an emotional poll that may have, when you catch somebody on a good day, bad day, whatever.
Hi, Kat Coppola, Nation. So speaking of the economy, a lot of people vote on pocketbook issues and their literal pocketbook. Economic metrics show there is improvement, and yet a lot of times you're hearing that the average American is just not feeling it. They go to the gas station, they go to the grocery store, the cost of butter is high still. What is the Biden strategy to both lower that, but also to address the sentiment that inflation is not necessarily going down and they're not feeling it in the pocketbook?
Yeah, look, I think we have to do multiple things at one time, right? I think as you all have probably seen our advertising on air, it's extremely important that we help Americans draw that contrast between what is happening in the economy and the president. It's extremely important that we continue to tout inflation numbers as they continue to drop, that we continue to tout jobs reports when they continue to show more jobs created. You know, Joe Biden has created 14 million jobs, 800,000 really good paying manufacturing jobs. We have to continue to beat that home. But at the same time, the premise of your question, I completely understand as well, which has to marry what people are feeling. But, you know, I also think that it's really important to remind the American people where they were, you know, 4 years ago before Joe Biden took office. And so while, you know, we do from the campaign try our best not to just sort of go back to the doom and gloom of COVID and all of that, it is extremely important to remind the American people how Donald Trump and the Republicans completely wrecked the economy, how they continue to hold things hostage. I mean, even right here in Alabama, Senator Tuberville is now lifting a blockade that refused to give promotions and pay to military families. So, you know, when it comes to these arguments about the economy, our campaign has to continue to do what we've been doing, which is message and advertise on these issues. But it's also going to be extremely important that we draw the contrast between what the Republicans have done, what they will do when they get power, if they're able to regain power.
And I would like to add real quick, as time goes on, you don't feel these things immediately. The price of butter may be still up, but the price of eggs is down. Gas is coming down. And people feel those, there's a little bit of a lag time. And every quarter when corporations release their record profits, they're going to wonder, am I paying for that for those stockholders? Am I paying that for the CEO? So there's a lot of connections that I think are going to be made over the next, 11 months.
And quite frankly, Republicans can't have it both ways, right? These businesses and billionaires can't continue to have record profits, as Senator Jones is saying, and at the same time them saying that the economy is terrible. Well, it's terrible precisely because of the policies that Republicans have put in place to allow big businesses, pharma, corporations to get ahead of the middle class, while, you know, we Democrats, under President Biden's leadership, have continuously been going at all of these issues, whether it's lowering the cost of prescription drugs, whether it's raising the minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage, and that's exactly the contrast that we have to draw for the American people.
We're going to do Paul, Garrett, and then right here in the front, because that's all we're going to have time for, but then you can follow up with after if you guys have other questions.
Thanks, Paul Stein, Fox News. I spend most of my time covering the Republicans. They're a little busy right now in Iowa and New Hampshire. We don't expect to see President Biden in either of those states, but can you give us a preview when we get to the new year? How often are we going to see the president in South Carolina, Nevada, Michigan, those early states in your calendar? And what is the Biden campaigning on the trail going to look like?
Look, at the end of the day, that's sort of our secret sauce. President Biden is extremely good and is an excellent retail politician, and so we're excited to get both him and the vice president out to all of our states. We've announced some state staff, as you all have probably seen in South Carolina, and are going to begin putting boots on the ground and building out our early state leadership teams in the early primary states, South Carolina being first, then followed by Nevada and Michigan, and Georgia shortly thereafter. But the president's going to be out and about. I mean, we've seen the president out. He was just in Boston. He was in Denver. Joe Biden is campaigning right now, actually. It may be under the guise of an official event when he's going and doing the things, and it's really important that he remains president of the United States. But when it comes down to it, there is nobody working harder to get Joe Biden reelected than Joe Biden, and so he's going to continue to hit the ground in all of those early states as we head into the new year.
I have a question for Senator Jones. I was just on the Hill the other day. Your former colleagues, it looks like their negotiations on Ukraine aid and the border, which are now linked together, are totally falling apart. How important do you think it is to the president's reelection that both of those issues be addressed either right now in this moment or at some point in the not too distant future?
Well, obviously, if they can be addressed, it would be a good thing. It would be a good thing for the country. It would be, forget whether it helps Joe Biden's presidency. It would be a good thing for the country.
Well,
they
given the nature of where we are right now, I'd rather not
I understand that.
It's important to my question.
Well, but the flip side of that, though, with all due respect, is that shouldn't be the calculation. And unfortunately, that's too much of the calculation that goes on in the Senate and the House these days. What's good for us politically? And these guys need to come together. There is a lot of common ground, particularly on Ukraine. But I was there, and I saw the common ground on immigration, if they could just get past the politics of it. So the answer to the question really needs to be the House, the Senate, these so-called negotiators. And I don't like using that term because people think that no one's negotiating for them. They're only negotiating for Republicans and Democrats, and that's what happened. They need to be finding that common ground. It will help everybody. It would help Republican candidates. It will help Joe Biden. It will help the country. So that's really what needs to happen.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm from WNK in Florida. Democrats hope that an appeals court would overturn a new congressional map in Florida that essentially eliminated a traditionally Democratic seat in Congress. It did not. How critical is that ruling?
Look, at the end of the day, I think Democrats across the country have been fighting back on these cases in regards to map and gerrymandering in the districts that are being drawn unfairly to honestly cut out Democrats. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that it was going to be a huge deal, but it's just something that's been, par for the course with what we've seen Republican legislatures do when they're drawing these maps to try to cut Democrats out. But from our perspective, we're going to do everything we can to, one, continue to monitor this type of legislation to try to kill it in the cradle, as I like to say, and two, at the end of the day, for us, from a presidential perspective, you have to turn out the state. And so voters, regardless of what district they may be drawn into or out of, that's extremely important on a congressional level when you're talking about seats. But for the Biden-Harris campaign, when we're talking about going into Florida, it's about winning the state holistically. And so for us, as much, it doesn't really matter where those voters may live in the state, because we have an obligation to turn them all out and reach them all, regardless of where they are at any corner of the state.
And we're going to make up for it in Alabama by our new congressional district.
We're very proud of that. So it's restoring fairness to people. That's what it's all about, is restoring fairness to people. In Alabama, we're getting a new congressional District 2 seat. So anything can happen, and we hope it happens in Florida.
Either one of you thinking about running for that seat? The two Alabama politicians up here.
Well, qualifying has ended, and we've got a large slate of good candidates that are running for that seat, but it's no place like home. Dorothy wants to get home together. So we're looking forward to those candidates that are running for the seat. We're going to work very hard to make sure we get a Democrat in that seat.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks.
You've welcome to give you other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Take a water.
No, come on.